Welcome to episode 10 of the Unstoppable Leader podcast with your host, Maria Patisetti. Today's guest is a very special unstoppable leader, Andrea Culligan. Now, Andrea is currently partner in Deloitte, but that's not what I was so excited about for today. It's the journey that got her there. Andrea started and ran 7 businesses across 2 countries, and the journey is the one that is so memorable and so many lessons learned for her, and she's about to share that with us today. We go through all of her trials and tribulations, the successes, the ups and downs. And what I love about this episode is the authenticity with which Andrea shared the journey, including mental health. I really hope you get out of this what I got out of it, because I actually listened to this several times. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome to the Unstoppable Leader podcast with your host, Maria Patisetti. And today's guest is a very special unstoppable leader, Andrea Culligan. Now, Andrea is currently partner at Deloitte Monitor, but what has me excited is the journey that Andrea has been on to get to where she is today. Now, Andrea, a while ago, founded and ran 7 businesses across Australia and Canada. She is Canadian. The accent will give it away. And she has won many awards. New South Wales Telstra Young Businesswoman of the Year, New South Wales Telstra Small Business of the Year, BRW Fast 100 list, and many, I'm sure, Andrea. But her journey that's very exciting for me personally is the journey that she took between the years of 2014 and 2016, where she spent time with meditation specialists in Vietnam, ashrams in India and Cambodia, and Andrea spent some time singing in Nashville, and she's a blues singer. Welcome, Andrea.
To my jazz fans. Thank you. Thank you for having me, Maria. I'm so excited.
It's an absolute pleasure and a privilege, because I know how much you've done in life, and I know that our listeners will benefit a lot from the lessons you've learned, Andrea, and that's my intention for the people who are listening, to walk away with practical things that they could use right now. And right now, right in the middle of COVID, is a fantastic time to be speaking with somebody like you. So thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Oh, I'm delighted. Thank you for asking me.
So the first question I have is, how did you get started in business, and how did your life and journey end with the start of those businesses?
My God, I love these questions because, when I listen to other podcasts and people have these really formulaic approaches to, I identified this really big problem and I solved it with purpose. Let me kind of start from the beginning. So thank you so much for clarifying that I am Canadian. It used to be my kind of first line, which is I'm Canadian, not American, especially through the election, because I just didn't want to engage in the conversation. Wanted to play quite neutral. But I have been in Australia for 23 years now, so longer in Australia than I have been in Canada, which is an interesting feeling. I was raised in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, which is kind of a mining town. I had this big aspiration to maybe be a secretary one day. One of the things that I was incredibly inspired by was, and those of my age will remember the film, Melanie Griffiths was the lead star in a film called Working Girl.
Yes.
And I was just so excited by this, carrying a briefcase down the street and, these trainers with my slouch socks walking down New York City streets. And I thought, I just want to be that. I don't really care how. And I wanted to be this fantastic secretary. And I didn't, my dad was a car salesman and an insurance salesman, a fantastic one, really passionate about customer experience and all that kind of stuff. But, there wasn't any really white collar environment in my house. And we didn't really have friends or family that exuded those type of roles or experiences. So I didn't, they always say you can't be what you can't see. Right. And so I thought, I'm just going to be this great secretary. I didn't have these great big aspirations. And then I decided to leave Canada for what was supposed to be a 3-month holiday. Now, my father is Australian, and so I was gifted with Australian citizenship very early on. And I didn't need to get a visa or anything. And I landed in Brisbane with $300 to my name. And I always share this story because it's a really big tip on making sure that you use experts who have been there before. I went into the travel agency and said, I want to go to Australia. I want to go to the city that's closest to the beach. Can I get a ticket for that? And she sent me to Brisbane. And I'll never forget that moment of like, she's obviously never been to Australia. For those on the call who don't know, Brisbane is probably the furthest away from a beach. So it was a bit of a like, all right, never trust an expert who hasn't done it themselves. So anyways, I landed in Brisbane. I only had $300 to my name.
Wow.
And I had left my family and everything behind me, and just decided to kind of say yes. And it was really the beginning of what I lovingly label Life 2.0. And it helped me explore possibilities I never thought possible. And it pushed me out of my comfort zone on so many occasions. I lived in some of the most remote parts of Australia. I had some of the most unusual jobs. I ran pubs in Cape York in the middle of nowhere where I was the third woman in town. I guided kayaking trips out of Southwest Australia. I ran whale watching tours in boats, on boats in Harvey Bay. And what was funny is that in every one of those opportunities that I entertained or engaged in, someone asked me, have you had experience doing this before? And of course I have. I'm from the prairies in Canada. I'd never run a whale watching boat before in my life. I've been kayaking a couple of times. So I just kind of just took it, by charge and fell into these environments. I was living in Cape York when I had a phone call from one of my dear friends who lived in California at the time. And she said, I'm coming to Cairns. You must meet me there. And we're going to go to Sydney. I'm like, I don't want to go to Sydney. I don't like big cities. I'm a country girl. I don't want to go to these big city environments. And she's like, no, just meet me in Cairns. And she basically just didn't give me an option, hung up the phone. And a month later, I met her in Cairns. And she came from a very wealthy family and I didn't. And I also love meeting new people. So she's like, let's stay in hotels. And I'm like, let's stay in 12-person dorms. So we had this interesting experience of taking a bus down the coast to Sydney. And my first night in Sydney, staying in the Menzies Hotel, which is actually now being demolished into building blocks, but it was a really iconic hotel. And she's like, we're staying in this hotel and I'm paying for it. But it's this iconic Sydney experience and going out and seeing the Harbour Bridge. And it started to open my eyes into what was possible. And I'm so grateful for so many reasons. Firstly, she unfortunately passed away from a brain aneurysm at the age of 28, only 3 years later. And obviously left this great legacy. She's the one who brought me to Sydney.
Wow.
Really. And then, I started to just keep flowing into these environments, and flow is actually now probably more of my life of a consideration than it was at the time, but it was how I lived my life, which was like, oh, I don't really have control over this. I'm probably a little bit more directed now. And I started working in technology because I thought it was different and unique. And I joined a startup that was creating Australia's first free email service, an online community. We were bold, courageous, a bit uncouth. Our tagline was I'm free, I'm easy, because we could give away free email addresses. And you can imagine like the guerrilla marketing is stuff that you just could not do now. We used to walk into pubs on university campuses because we knew that university students were a really great market. They understood this evolution of technology. Yes. And we would have these coasters created that gave people an opportunity to pick up others in the bar using these coasters saying, I'm free, I'm easy.
How good was it? Good marketing, great marketing.
Yeah, I'd be bloody arrested now if I did that. But, and we never asked for permission. We used to just like go and put these coasters in pubs and then put stickers on doors and things like that. And then about 6 months after I started, I had one other colleague that I was working with who was one of the founders of the business. He resigned. He didn't really want the startup life. And I was offered equity in the business and I took it. And from there, it became a roller coaster of 17 years.
Wow.
So I like to share that story and reasoning and rationale because I didn't graduate from university. We may talk about it. I'm not an academically driven person. My brother sent my report card that my father had from my high school years. And it was like chemistry, 42%, mathematics, 38%. Like I was a failure at everything. And the two things that I was fantastic at, drama was 80%, performing arts was 97%. So I wasn't this academic person who had this formulaic wisdom of what does entrepreneurship and life look like. It was the attributes of saying yes, of diving in, of going with the flow, of connecting people, of being bold, that that kind of put me into the foray of the uncomfortable and realizing that that's actually where I fit the best.
Yeah, because I was also thinking the other thing that a lot of people think about is you hear these stories of entrepreneurs who were entrepreneurs since the age of 6. So it's kind of nice to hear that you weren't an entrepreneur at 6 and 13, because some people also think, oh my gosh, I was never an entrepreneurial mind at that age. So can I ever become one?
It's funny. So I reflect back on this. So no, I didn't, like, I did the lemonade stands and
Yes,
all that kind of stuff. Like, if people think that that's a unique thing. No, we all did it in, you know,
in different ways.
if you were born in the 70s, you
Yeah.
inevitably had a lemonade stand because your parents didn't give you pocket money, and that was the only way you were going to get some coin. No one at that point, like I listen to parents now, they're like, oh yeah, my daughter had a lemonade stand and I taught her about the value of the lemons and the cost of the sugar. And we never did that. It was just like, wow, what's in the cupboards? Chuck it in a bucket and off we go. But it wasn't for the purpose of starting a business, right? So,
Yeah.
but I do reflect. So my father is innately, even if he won't admit it, is an entrepreneur at heart. And his entire life was built on a commission-only structure. So if he didn't make bank or make business, then he didn't eat. And that was a pretty roller coaster environment. But him and I actually started creating and working on a fleet and lease business that I kind of ran with him when I was in my teenage years. And at the time, it was just, well, you know, this is what I do. It wasn't entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't a startup. It was like, oh, well, no, we can see that there's a gap here, and Dad's asked me to help out, and you know, I've got the charisma to go and have a chat with people, and they're shocked that this kind of 15-year-old is kind of getting them to sign deals.
I have to ask you though,
yeah,
were you always confident and bold?
I've always been bold.
Yeah. Where did you get that from?
I absolutely say my dad. So Dad's Australian, left home when he was 16, traveled the world for 7 years. You talk about charisma, and he's just probably one of the funniest men I have ever met in my life. And that comes with its own case of, you know, of scenarios that, you know, when you're a teenager, you're like, I just wish you were a little bit normal. But that sense of boldness, and also, you know, and Brene Brown talks about this. She has a specific description of how when she left her house, there was like a warrior cry. And my dad used to do that to us as kids. He would look at us as we left the house at certain times of our life, and he'd say, what's your last name? And we'd be like, Culligan. What's your last name? Culligan. And it'd be like, ah! And then we'd run out the house and like wonder why we got speeding tickets within the first 10 minutes, right? But Dad kind of created this sense of like, push, shove, make it happen. You can do anything. And when I got glasses, I'll never forget when I had to get glasses to read a computer screen, I was so devastated. And my boyfriend at the time was like, what is your problem with it? Just glasses, get over yourself. And I'm like, yeah, but now I can't be a fighter pilot.
Oh.
And he said, but did you want to be a fighter pilot? I said, no, but now it's the one thing I can't do. And so, you know, Dad always told me that everything was possible. And I think what I'm seeing interesting now is I'm building on that and now thinking bigger than I ever did. You know, I wasn't necessarily raised with achievable big picture thinking. It was like, you can do anything. And, you know, to your point, Maria, the practicality of that was like, well, what the hell does that mean for someone like me? You know, am I going to be an astronaut? What do I get excited? I don't know. Whereas now I look and I go, oh, okay, now I'm starting to understand. I didn't see bigger, but I know I had the boldness to get there. Does that make sense?
Yes, it absolutely does. Now, that first business of yours did very well, very quickly. I read that it's about 4 years you hit several $1 million, and obviously very, very successful. What was that like, that journey? Clearly you were a co-founder, is that right, Andrew? There were a couple of owners.
I was a co-founder.
Yeah.
I was the only operational founder, so I don't know what we call that these days.
I don't know, active? You know, but the silent partners. I don't know what they call it these days.
I had 2 silent business partners who, I had 3. Unfortunately, one of them passed away.
Oh, gosh.
He was an inspiring, fantastic man, full of wisdom. His son and I worked together. We didn't necessarily see eye to eye, and we had a bit of a fallout later on, but his father was incredibly inspirational to me. And his business partner that he'd worked with for 20 or some odd years became a bit of a silent mentor to me. It was an interesting, anyways, the journey was interesting. Let me tell you about ignorance. So
Please do.
the naivety and ignorance of starting a business when startup community doesn't exist. It's not okay to be a female running a company, especially in tech. It's not okay to be a female with an American accent in Australia. In late 99, 2000s, dot-com bust, Ansett crash, Twin Towers, all of these environments were around me. But I was so ignorant to it all. So I just kind of found loopholes. And there's some funny stories I love to share that, startups do not have to experience now. If I had a phone, I had to buy a $2,000 telephone system, and I couldn't rent a co-working space, and I couldn't work from home. So I had to have a lease. I had to have an office space. I had to have a landline, which is bizarre when we think about it. I'm in the Deloitte offices, and nowhere do we have a landline.
Yeah.
I think maybe our concierge has one, but it's based on a VoIP system.
Yes.
Versus a landline system. So the cost of creating a business was immense. And then the other barriers that came through were things like, I would pretend I was the receptionist. So I was the only employee, and the landline would ring. Yeah, landline would ring, and I'd say, "Oh, g'day, welcome to Unimail," and I'd put on my worst Australian accent, and then they'd ask for me, and then I'd put them on hold, and then I would, answer the phone. "Oh, hello, Andrea speaking," and people believed that I had this receptionist. And when we had clients coming to the office, I used to literally get on my mates to come to the office. I'd work it around everybody's lunchtime, and so it was really funny now that I think about it. And I believe that sense of ignorance just allowed me to be kind of adverse to failure, but yet driven by it at the same time. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to fail because I saw this beautiful opportunity to create something that was uniquely mine, but I also didn't know what failure meant. Like if I lost everything, and I'd say this to young startup founders, like go big early because you've got less to lose.
Yes.
Learn those mistakes. Find great mentors, ask all the dumb questions because you're not intrinsically connected to the outcome yet. And the older we get, the more risk averse. I ride motorbikes, and I went and did another advanced course in the weekend, and they were stating the statistics of crashes happen. And I'll ask you actually, do you think a 25-year-old and under is the largest amount of accidents, or the 35 and over?
Oh, now that you've kind of preempted me, I think you
right?
preempted. So I know it's 35 over because they're worried about it and they probably attract that stuff.
So, when you're like flying around a corner, you're more risk averse, and so you're more twitchy. Whereas when you're 25, you're like, well, it's never happened to me before, so let's go for it. And so I think that sense of naivety actually made those first 4 years really simple. It was actually the year of winning the Telstra Awards that hit me like a total train wreck. And there was a series of consequences and situations that occurred during that time, which was, I was in the middle of a lawsuit. I started my logistics business. So I was driving trucks, like driving, 1-ton trucks and doing all the logistics stuff. I was growing at a rate of knots. We were making a lot of money, but I'm not really into stuff. So it was just like, I don't know, what we do with this. I don't know how to run a business that's in the millions of dollars. And then we were also losing hundreds of thousands of dollars due to this lawsuit that would never go away. And, there was all these things. And so I ended up having a nervous breakdown in 2009. And, I reflect on winning the Telstra Businesswoman of the Year Award, a Telstra Young Businesswoman of the Year Award, just goes to show how long ago that was, 2009. And that afternoon, when I should be celebrating, I went home and I closed all the curtains, and the phone was ringing off the hook, and I just would not answer anyone. I was having a massive anxiety attack, and I didn't know how to deal with all of the things, the good, the bad, the indifferent. That people think anxiety only comes from bad things. Sometimes anxiety happens because it's just overwhelm of all the good things. And how do you manage that, and how do you not self-sabotage at the same time? So the first 4 years were simple. I think it was the next kind of 6 that got a little tricky.
So obviously that was what at that point the business was still doing well when you had that anxiety attack, right? Or the first nervous breakdown. And then, but I know right? Also, sorry.
It was leading into the GFC. So there was big looming things. So I had a lawsuit going on. I had a logistics business that was growing at like 100% per annum. And this distribution logistics business was just, I think about now all the digital tools I would put in to automate, but this was so manual and so detail oriented, and having to drive trucks and manage bookings and logistics of 100 companies around Australia, working with third-party providers was a tricky one. It was a great business. I think it's still operational. We sold it actually. But yeah, going through this lawsuit, business partner and I didn't necessarily see eye to eye, and I obviously reflect now and realize, my definite part in that scenario. And I didn't know how to lead. I was young and ignorant and
successful very quickly too, Andrea. That's also a hard thing to take when you're young.
And arrogant, right? All of a sudden this arrogance arrived, and this sense of frivolity left, and the sense of apathy kind of left, and this, oh God, wait a minute, now I've got to actually prove myself. Kind of crept in. And so there's some pivotal changes and pivotal moments in my professional life that impacted my personal life, and that was, that breakdown happened 3 days into a 7-week tour where I was with my soon to be, at the time we were about to be engaged, my boyfriend at the time. We were going to meet all of our friends and families. We were going to, so it was 5 weeks. We were going to 7 countries in 5 weeks to stay at other people's houses and meet all these strangers. And we thought we'd start off with a little week in Honolulu in Hawaii to just chill out after what was the most intense period of, lawsuits and everything else. And we were also trying to buy a house at the time, and it was just chaos. It was just not smart. And 3 days into the trip, my brain started telling me things that I felt completely schizophrenic. I thought I was going absolutely batshit crazy.
Yeah.
And it progressively got worse. And so I thought, I'll have a couple of glasses of wine at night and that'll make it go away. No, nothing stopped it. And, this was 2009. So the stigma around
mental health,
having that conversation was 10 times more than it is now. And I just had no idea what to do. And that was a pivotal change in my life, I guess.
How did you get the help you needed? I know you said at that young age, because you were so successful, arrogance creeps in. It's very easy because when you become super successful, what feels like overnight, 4 years is overnight in business world. How did you get past that, Andrea, and reach out for help?
I'm just laughing because here I am in my corporate office drinking out of a beer stein. Yep.
It's Deloitte, right? So no one's looking.
Water, not vodka. How did I get past it? So look, it was this is going to sound so dramatic, but it's worthwhile sharing. I phoned my dad halfway through, and I said, my dad and I have had a roller coaster relationship. So we were probably, I don't know, midway at this point. And I said, I think I'm going crazy. I think I'm going absolutely crazy. And he said, what's happening? And I just said, I feel like I'm not in love with this person that I'm standing with, even though I can't be away from him. Like physically being distanced from him would give me anxiety. Physically being next to him would give me anxiety. Yeah. My brain was just, I could not stop it. And he's like talking me through this. I was at country number 4, and I had another 2 weeks left to go. And for anyone who has experienced anxiety, they'll know that being out of your safe place is even more terrifying. Generally your home is safe.
It's a routine, right? That you're comfortable.
Control your elements. Yeah. Whereas I was, I'll never forget, we had to go to Switzerland. we'd gone out the night before with my soon-to-be brother-in-law. We'd had a big night in this club. I was spending kind of every hour, 20 minutes in the bathroom, pretending I had to go to the loo, but I was just trying to breathe and freaking out from the sensories and the noises. And then we got on a plane and flew to Switzerland. And then there was 13 cousins lined the driveway.
Wow.
And, you know, in Switzerland, you do the triple kiss,
Yes.
which obviously Francisca knows very well. But, you know, so I'm like, you know, triple kissing all the way down the driveway with all these 13 people that don't speak any English. And so I'm phoning my dad going, I'm losing my mind. I kind of struggled through the next few weeks, and I got back home, and I thought, oh, once I get home, I'll be fine. Once I get home, I'll be fine. And it was 5 days after I got home, and I found myself, the only way that the brain would stop is if I did some element of self-harm. And the way that I did self-harm was that I would bang my head against the concrete wall in our apartment, not to the point of bleeding or bruising, but just enough. I'd kind of found that cushion point that would redirect my brain to pain versus the roller coaster. And anyone who has had anxiety or self-harm, you know, you may be relating to this. And, you know, I had so many judgments about people with depression and anxiety and self-harm, and until these moments, and I realized exactly, you know, what it meant for me. And it means something different for everyone else, right? Yeah. But it was a really trying moment. And my boyfriend caught me. Wow. And it was the middle of the night because I couldn't sleep. And he caught me and he's like, what are you doing? And I said, and I just was sobbing. I'm like, it's the only way it will stop. It's the only way it will stop. And I found my dad in that moment again. And I'm like, Dad, I just don't know what to do. And he said, you need to go to the doctor immediately. And I went to the doctor the next morning, and I'm not saying this is the right thing to do, but it was the right thing to do for me.
It's your experience, right? Everybody experiences this differently. I mean, I've had depression and anxiety in the family, so everybody does it differently.
Well, and this was the thing. My family had never talked about it, but through these conversations with my dad, I realized that it was inherited. Yeah. As part of, you know, it was everyone in the family, and there's alcoholism in my family, and all these things can be intrinsically connected. So I thought I only had kind of one challenge of, you know, potential alcoholism in my family, but then Dad's like, oh no, there's anxiety, and I'm like, oh great, well this would have been pretty helpful about, you know,
that generation didn't talk about it though, Andrea.
No, and I just think, you know, how challenging it was for me. I can only imagine what it was like for my grandparents and you know, and all those that came back from the war. And so it's hard because I was hearing those stories and then thinking, yeah, but look at me, I'm this, you know, white woman in a Western world with all the luxuries and privileges. But, you know, these things are relative and they're subjective. And I've heard so much about COVID where people say, oh yeah, but I've not got it that bad. But you have it bad for you. So I don't think people should devalue their own experiences of what they're feeling because it doesn't line up to a third world scenario in a genocide country. That wasn't your raising of life. So, you know, in those moments, I had to really challenge myself to go to the doctor and say, oh gosh, I've got this scenario. I went to the doctor the next morning and he asked me a series of questions and he automatically put me onto medication and also locked me in with a psychologist. And I remember walking out of that appointment and feeling as though my life had ended, which sounds so silly now.
It's not at all.
Everyone kept saying, and this is what I don't like about the way we talk about mental health. Everyone kept saying, your life will never be the same. Your life will never be the same. You'll have to change everything. No one tells you, you know what? It's going to be awesome. It's never going to be the same. Let me tell you how much good is going to come from this. And so the framing that I had walking in and out of that appointment was, my life is never going to be the same and it's going to be horrible. I'm never going to run a business. No one's going to, you know, want to work with me. I'm never going to be able to lead a team, all that kind of stuff. And so I never told anyone. Oh, gosh. I didn't tell anyone. And, you know, I used to sit in client meetings, just wringing my hands under the table, trying to inflict some sort of pain or mechanism to try and stop my brain to just focus on this meeting. And up until, going to the doctor, and I went on medication straight away. He said, you'll have to be on it for at least a year. You've got to go see this psychologist. And it was so terrifying because I didn't have anyone to talk to about it. And I didn't want to tell anyone about it because I didn't want my life to change. I loved this pace and this excitement and this energy, and this is so amazing. And for the next 6 months, I spent 3 hours a week with a psychologist, and I took medication, and it started to unpack a lot of the big situational and life scenarios that I needed to review. At 6 months, I went off the medication. The doctor advised me against that. I didn't like how medication made me feel. And it was, this is 11 years ago. So it was at a time when they were still trying to figure out, I'm sure there's been huge changes in medication since.
Much better now. I've seen family members on it, and yes, there are side effects, but probably not as harsh as it was back then.
Yeah. I mean, I got a little bit chunky and, all that kind of stuff that we worry about. But it just made me really fuzzy. And I like being clear, so much so that I don't like to get drunk. I don't like, even though I love beautiful alcohol beverages.
You like being in control.
I like to be in control of my own sense of self, not necessarily the situation. So long story short, after 6 months, I went off the medication. Yes, I experienced some withdrawal around it. Yes, I had sporadic anxiety attacks. And also, yes, I have had situations where I've had months of anxiety reoccur. Even in 2017, I had another bout for about 6-7 weeks. The difference is now I understand how I manage it. So it was a gift, right? Because I want to operate at 1,000%, at 7,000 RPMs. Like, I want that life.
Of course. Well, look at you now. You're a partner in Deloitte. You're still operating at that, Andrea.
I absolutely am. And I said, that's really the point I want to get across is like, it might change your life, but it might change your life for the better. And, I wish I would have kind of seen that sooner. I realize I'm droning on.
No, that's okay. I was going to ask you, that was 2009. So what happened what got you to India, Cambodia, all of that?
I'll make that journey brief, and then I'll have more fun in the 214 to 216, because it's probably where I light up as well. So the stats are 7 businesses, 2 exits, all the awards, great stuff. The downside was that I had a business partner buyout that went pretty south. I had some finance issues that were caught at the last hour scenarios. I had the lawsuit that went all the way to the high court. I was a bit of an asshole as a leader for a period of time, and I had my entire team kind of walk out on me one afternoon. And then eventually, trying to scrape back the business, we declared voluntary administration and liquidation, and we had to shut the doors. And it broke me again, So here I was thinking that I'd solved all my issues in 2010.
Well, you made it for all intents and purposes. You had made it.
In the eyes of some people, in what success looks like.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So we had to really look at what we're going to do, and bless him, my husband and I are now divorced, but he is a beautiful man, and he encouraged and got us to sell everything we owned, including house, cutlery, everything you could possibly imagine. And we flew to Canada and we bought a caravan.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was like, no one's ever going to work with me again. This whole victim drama play game kind of kept going on again. He's like, it doesn't matter. Like, this is the people think there's freedom when you own a business. No.
I tell people that all the time.
No, there's a lot of freedom in this role, because if I walk out, the team still have jobs. If there's work for them, of course. If I walk out, the business still continues. I'm not kind of all tentacles intrinsically connected in. Withdrawing yourself from a company that you own and the people around, like that's that's not an easy gig. So it was the first time in almost 20 years that I'd had freedom, true freedom. Yeah, I could take holidays whenever I want, but this was like, I don't owe anyone anything. I don't have to pay anyone's salary. I just need to take care of myself. And that was an astonishing feeling. And so, he's like, it's the first time we've ever really had freedom. Let's do this. And so we went to Canada, and I slept for 16 hours a day. I was absolutely burnt out and buggered and emotionally toasted. Not only had the business gone under, then, it was every step of the way the universe was telling me, it's time to wrap this up. It's time to wrap this up. So much so that even when we shut down the business and I opened up a side consultancy that we just worked purely on projects, I had project teams. One of the people that I trusted and had given so much to.
Oh no. I can hear what this is.
Yeah. Oh no, you won't even imagine how this worked. She resigned suddenly, wouldn't tell me why. And then that night, this is why I love the universe so much, because I was like, no, it's still good to go. Like, we're going to make this happen. And then that night I went to the theater, and she was standing in line with the client that had just pulled the pin on kind of $13 million worth of work per year. And they're having an affair.
Oh, wow. And
so she had resigned. He was married. All these kind of, and the universe was just like, you're just not getting it, are you, darling? Like, we've tried to pull all these threads to kind of softly show you. And it's time to look at life 3.0. And so 3.0 was another big journey, which was going to Canada and buying the caravan and just kind of rebooting. And I spent the most beautiful 2 years doing the most in-depth self-exploration.
Yes.
That was the greatest gift.
Yeah. Wow. I think it was, I don't know if it was one of your interviews that I listened to or something that you wrote. I keep telling myself, because I keep hearing it ever since I read it, right? You said, was it Dean McAvoy who said, universe first gives you a feather. If you don't listen, it gives you a pine. And if you don't listen, it gives you not just one bricks, but probably a whole lot of them. I've had several bricks, and I'm sure most of us had, but I just thought that was just so beautiful. And clearly you had your feather and your pines, but you just were not listening.
It's hilarious.
It just slammed you with the bricks.
It could have been so much easier. I was listening to, I love the book Return to Love by Marianne Williamson. And
I love Marianne Williamson. God.
I'm a voracious reader, and she's one of my favorites. And I reread different books, Untitled Soul, those kind of books when I feel like I'm slightly losing my way. And I was listening to it again this morning, Return to Love, and just laughing out loud at how we think we've got control.
Isn't that funny?
It's hilarious.
Yes.
It's hilarious. So,
and especially the A types. I think whether you're an entrepreneur or you're a leader in a business or just starting out, wherever you are in life, whatever role you play, I think we all really do have this thing that we have complete control over everything.
Yeah. And I think what I get wary of is that when people say, oh, we don't have control, people think that's apathy and that we don't do anything.
Yes.
And that's completely incorrect. It's how do we connect to our greatest purpose and push towards that, but be open to the fluidity of what is actually possible. Yeah. And that there is a greater plan for us than we could have ever dreamt of. One of my first jobs, and a job I did for many years, was I worked in petrol stations in Canada. And if you were to work at a petrol station here in Australia, it's not a big deal. But in Canada, especially where I'm from, it's minus 25 to minus 40 for a solid 3 months of the year. And in the 80s, you would go out and do full service petrol pumping. So you go out and pump the petrol for someone. And that's what I did from the age of like 12 to 16. And, sporadically around jobs. And it was minus 35 outside. And I was living for the $1 tip I might get. And I never in a million years imagined I would have the life I've had. And, whilst I would like to think that I've had a hand in making that happen, it's been my openness and willingness to flow with whatever your could be God or your spiritual power or whatever you believe in, your greater faith is showing you your possibility to be and do. And I think that's the most exciting way to live.
Can you, I'm going to ask you a specific question actually. In the time that you spent really going inward, which is what you did in India, Cambodia, Vietnam, can you tell me maybe 2 things before we wrap up that you actually truly got that changed your life from those places? I know this is tough to pick 2 things. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Trying to think of 2.
Or whatever comes to mind, even 1.
I'll well, and again, the universe is going to tell me what I need to tell you. So
Yes.
Cambodia showed me the value of the diversity of problems. So in the ashram, there was those that were from an army background. There was the corporate women looking for the detox retreat, even though there was nothing glamorous about this place. It was a fabulous energy, but nothing glamorous. The diversity of people that are trying to seek betterment for themselves and how valuable that is. And why I thought about that is that one afternoon, every day they kind of shared a guru and some of the teachings of the guru. And I love Osho. He's one of my favorites.
My husband loves Osho. We've got the Osho book. He's obsessed.
Great, yeah. And there's a couple of great books that he's written. I don't ever recommend listening to the audio book because he does get a bit up himself. But that's why I love this guy.
Yeah.
And there's some key principles that came through, which was, you don't have to be poor to do good. And, and that when I sat in that room and they were sharing these principles about how they had this guru talking about his Bentley, and at the same time, focusing on the power of good and social justice and the diversity of the conversation that went on due to the backgrounds, that was probably one of the most powerful moments in those 2 years for me. And that just still vividly, I'll never forget sitting there going, this guy is like something else. And the listening in on how people perceive that and why it was important was really, really interesting.
Absolutely. I'm going to have to ask you before I wrap up. Yeah. There's so many, again, we've got like a variety of listeners listening to this, young, older, business owners, people working in corporate, people who want to make it, people who have made it, the whole lot, right? What would be 2 things that you would share with these people that could make a difference? I know I keep throwing these curlies.
You do. So again, I'm just going to listen. And the first thing that that's coming to me that's really important is that the career is the squiggly line.
Wow. Yeah.
And it's so interesting working in an environment where there's graduates that already have their 18 years planned out.
Yeah.
And that there are people that have been here for 20 years, or that, graduates think they need to be honors with distinction in order to work in organizations like this.
Yeah.
And my absolute advice whenever it's asked for is the career is a squiggly line. Focus on your attributes of self, like being the best version of yourself, which is my second point. So the first point is the career is a squiggly line. It actually adds value. The reason why you wanted to talk to me on this podcast is not because I am one of the leading partners running the space ecosystem sector for Deloitte. Super exciting. No one gives a shit. What people care about is did I sing in Nashville, and what I learned from a guru. So the professional experience gives me agency, but the attributes gives me the benefit. So the career is a squiggly line, which brings me to the second point. Invest whatever you can into self-development. And I don't mean go and see a business coach and that, map out everything. I'm suggesting emotional intelligence is the number 1 criteria for everything. And that will buy you whatever you want in your life. That will remove the stories that you choose to hold yourself back with. That will remove the victimness and victimhood that stops you from creating the relationships you want. That will remove the fear and the self-esteem restricting areas that stop you from going for the opportunities that are available and present to you, and that the universe is telling you you should seek. because emotional intelligence allows you to see you for the greatest gift that you can bring to the world. And it's not okay, I'm going to go do a 4-week program and that's it. This is a life practice. So read everything you can. There's so much online for you to read that's for free. You know, Joe Dispenza has free meditation.
Oh my goodness, I love Joe Dispenza.
Yeah, like anything you could possibly imagine. Elizabeth and Abraham, Abraham. Yeah. So if you read the Conversations with God book, remove the thought of like God and universe and whatever, because if that is a challenge for you, then that's what you need to explore. And exploring all those triggers is actually the gift. You know, I've had relationships that people are questioning, why would I stay in those relationships? And there's no domestic violence or violence in them, but they're just not like the easiest to connect. And I realize that the emotional intelligent part of me says that's what I need to learn. And until I've learned that and I'm at peace with that, then actually that roadblocks me, not just personally in my relationships, but professionally as a leader or any role I choose to play. So the career is the squiggly line. Number 1, love it, embrace it, rock with it and roll with it. Go do weird things because adventures fill your soul, jobs fill your pockets. Like that is the number 1 thing to remember. And the second thing is invest whatever you can. And there's plenty of free stuff online. Invest whatever you can around self-development and emotional intelligence. Those are the key things.
I'm so happy that you said both of those, particularly the second one. Very grateful, Andrea, because not enough leaders in the corporate world talk about that, right? So everybody talks about, you know, the traditional learning, which is go and do an MBA, because if you need to get into Deloitte, if you're from Wharton, it'll get you into McKinsey, you know, all that usual straight line stuff. So it's just amazing to hear it from somebody in your position, because I think the younger people need to hear that. Because that side of you, when you're so fulfilled and happy and full of joy, the career will just work.
Yeah, it will give you exactly what you're meant to be. You know, I never in a million years thought so. So I work in 3 really challenging sectors: energy and resources, real estate, and space. I purposely put myself in those sectors because I want to save the world, both on land and in the air.
Bless you.
Right?
Yeah.
So how am I going to make the biggest impact? Do I know what I'm doing every day? Little tip, not at all. But you know, this sense of emotional intelligence that I've learned allows me to go, I don't have to be the expert. I just need to be good at what I'm good at. And what do I want to do and live my purpose? And it's beyond the career line. It's beyond the job title. It's beyond what does the pay packet look like. It's absolutely about who do you choose to be in those environments. And that career line will work itself out.
Absolutely. I just want to say, I wanted to several times stop you during this, but I just let you flow because I just wanted to say thank you so much for the authenticity and the courage to be that open, because I'm going to start crying, the courage to be that open, because it's very hard when you're a young person to see somebody that authentic. So thank you.
Well, I'm very grateful for the opportunity to have long-winded answered all these 3 questions.
No, but there are so many gems, you have no idea. And see, you're in an absolute blessed position in the role that you're in, because in the organization that you're in, because what you say matters to a lot of people who generally take the traditional line. Entrepreneurs talk the talk that you talk. Very rarely do you see the corporate world speak the way you speak, and as openly as and authentically as you do. So thank you so much for sharing so much, and really appreciate especially the part on the mental health, because God knows right now, so many young people need to hear it. COVID has been tough for teenagers, young people.
Oh, everyone.
So,
yeah, it's really tough.
Thank you. Thank you for your time, and really,
total pleasure.
Really grateful, Andrea. Thank you.
Anytime, Maria, anytime.
Hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for tuning into the Unstoppable Leader podcast with me, your host, Maria Parissetti. And if I may ask you for a favor, please drop me a review on iTunes, Spotify, or Stitcher. I'd love your feedback and love to hear what you think. And if you want to stay up to date with me and the business that I'm in, then please check out my LinkedIn page, Maria Parissetti, or our website, theunstoppableleader.com. That is theunstoppableleader.com. Thanks for listening, and until next time, be unstoppable.